welcome to my channel. I made this video for my grade 3 students, and of course you are more than welcome also to watch this video as well. Now what I'm going to talk right now is two chapters become one. It's the birth of Moses and at the same time plagues in Egypt. Okay, I tried to wrap it up. I tried to combine it, so I'm gonna speak a little bit faster. Hope not too fast, and I'll try to kind of like make this kind of like information as concise as possible. Alright, so when we talk about the birth of Moses, all the information that we found out, the main source that we found out is from the book of Exodus. Yes, Exodus is the second book after Genesis. Go and read it yourself. It's fun. Okay, so who is the pharaoh in the story of Exodus? We do not know because the Bible did not mention the name of this pharaoh. But some scholars believe that it was Ramses II. But some others believe that it was Thutmose III, yes, the stepson of Hatshepsut. Some others believe that it was Amenhotep II, the two pharaoh before Hatshepsut. Yeah. Anyway, so each of this kind of like perspective, they have their own argument. They will have their own kind of like understanding. Yeah, we're not gonna cover that one, but nevertheless, let's just stick with this idea that Pharaoh here in the story of Exodus is a very powerful, is a very influential person in Egypt, and someone that's very important, to the point that Moses was very reluctant. Moses was very reluctant to this person. Without further ado, let's jump into the story. Okay, so the children of Israel live in Egypt thanks to Joseph. If you guys remember the story about Joseph, Joseph saved the day. Joseph saved Egypt from famine, and because of that one, Egyptian, they were being grateful to Joseph and let Joseph and his brothers and his fathers, the children of the Israel, to live in Egypt, and they live specifically in the land of Goshen, which is I think in a lower Egypt. Now, many years has come. At first, they were like about 70 of them. I think it's written in Exodus chapter 1 verse 5. Over the span of about 400 years, now Joseph and also the brothers and also Israel, they died. Now they were being replaced by their children's. So this is like 400 years later, several generations later. Now, of course, they live in Egypt. They have a quite numerous number. They have a quite plenty of like the Israelites who live in, or Israelites or Hebrew in Egypt. Now, here comes the Pharaoh. Now, this Pharaoh did not know about Joseph. This Pharaoh did not know what Joseph did in the past. This Pharaoh did not appreciate like what Joseph did to save Egypt from famine in the past. This is kind of like that kind of like Pharaoh that who do not know about history. So one thing that puzzled him and one thing that worries him is the numbers of the Jews, the numbers of the Hebrew who live in Egypt. So he was concerned that maybe one day this Hebrew will rebel against him, and then so he decided to kind of like enslave them somehow, to give them like a very difficult job, which is to make a mud brick. It's interesting how to make the mud brick. If you guys remember my lectures about Tower of Babel, okay, you have to keep stomping on this kind of like mixtures of mud, sands and water and also straw, yeah, to make a brick. Pay attention, it's a mud brick, not a stone. So if you have this kind of like pictures, or maybe you saw a cartoon or movie or animation that somehow the Hebrew, they work very hard building this pyramid, building this temple. No, it's not. Okay, those temples were being built by far before this Hebrew, and then those are made with stones. But this one, the Hebrew, they make mud bricks. So this mud bricks usually to build cities, okay, public facilities. Now, somehow it didn't work. No matter how hard Pharaoh tried to kind of like make them work hard to discourage them to have children, the numbers of the Hebrew keep adding. They still multiply. They still fruitful and multiply with children. So Pharaoh become extreme. He become extreme, and then he ordered his men to kill every male babies of the Hebrews. Many of this kind of like innocent babies, many of these innocent toddlers were being tossed into the Nile River and become like the snack for the for the alligators. Ugh, that's horrible. Now here comes Moses. Now Moses' parents came from the Levite tribes. Okay, from the Levite tribes. Now Moses was being well hidden by both of his parents. Moses grew up with his older siblings, of course, Aaron and Miriam. Now, to the point that baby Moses is just way too big and then way to become obvious, that the parents could no longer hide him. With a heavy heart, they have to kind of like let go Moses in the Nile River in a basket made out of a reed, and let him go in the Nile River. Okay, and somehow it turned out to be, I think you guys, most of you guys know already the story. The Egyptian princess, which is the daughter of the pharaoh, pick up the baby and then adopt the baby and then raise the baby as her own child, living in the palace together with the pharaoh, together with the prince. Now, she named this baby as Moses, which is it's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's kind of like interesting though. Moses in a Hebrew name means kind of like, drawing out of the reed or drawing out of the water. That is the meaning of Moses. Now, think about it. Egyptian princess naming the baby after the Hebrew names. Anyway, so but one thing for sure though, the word Moses, the name Moses, also it has a meaning in Egyptian language. It means birth of. Okay, the birth of. If you guys remember the name Tat Moses, what does it mean? I mean the birth of Moses. I mean, sorry, the birth of Moses, the birth of Thoth. Okay, the god of wisdom, Egyptian god of wisdom. Anyway, so as Moses grew up in the palace, the princess, like the princess hired a nanny to taking care of Moses. Now, surprise, surprise, this nanny turned out to be Moses' mom. Okay, Moses' mother. Now, as Moses grew up in the palace, he learned how to become Egyptian. He learned every kind of form of wisdom that the Egyptian must learn: read and write and counting, speak like Egyptian, talk like Egyptian, eat like Egyptian, walk like Egyptians. Okay, so he was being trained with all of those kind of things. His life, basically, if I need to summarize, he felt that his life was awesome. Okay, as a part of the royal family, royal member of the Egyptian pharaoh. One day, Moses killed an Egyptian. What? Yes, because one day he saw an Egyptian master beating up a Hebrew slave. Now Moses raised in his chest an anger. Hey, you cannot do that to my people Hebrew. So what did he do? He killed this Egyptian master, and then to get away from the consequences, he hid the body. He hid the body of this person. And guess what? Moses was so shocked and he was so terrified. It turned out to be, he was, what he did in secret, it was being found out by many people. So it's only a matter of time that he was being caught and arrested. Now, for your information, it was a big violations to kill a fellow Egyptians. So Moses, he ran away. He ran away from Egypt and he left. He's like what? He left his position as a prince of Egypt. He left probably also his kind of like what? His stepbrother, the next future pharaoh, and then he fled into a land by the name of Midian. Okay, it's somewhere around here in Sinai Peninsula. So there he met a man by the name of Jethro, and then he married with the daughter of Jethro, and then by the name of Zipporah. Now, after 40 years become prince of Egypt, living in Egypt. Now he lived for another 40 years in Midian as a humble shepherd. Yes, as a shepherd. From someone to a shepherd. From prince of Egypt into a shepherd. What a humble experience. Now, Moses married with Zipporah, and then Moses had a family. Life is so much simple for him, far away from Egypt, and then he taking care of the sheep. One day, Moses encounter with met God. Okay, he met with God, and then God in the form of a burning bush. This is kind of like a very kind of a extraordinary kind of like it's a kind of like extraordinary event for him. like you don't see kind of like burning bush in every day. And then this fire itself is was being described in more details that it produced light, but then again it does not burn, it does not kind of like it does not heat, has a heat and something like that. Now in that encounter, God told Moses to liberate, to set the Hebrew people free, to set God's God's chosen people free, which is God has a covenant with Abraham. Remember the story that God will rescue this Hebrew, the descendants of Abraham, away from Egypt. Now Moses at first he was very reluctant to it because he was like, if don't be harsh on Moses, okay? He was afraid and he was reluctant because he claimed that he had a problem with his speech, his stutter. And then he was afraid with the pharaoh. The pharaoh at this moment, oh yeah, probably the stepbrother that he grew up with, is a very powerful person. Is a very kind of like a strong and scary guy. Okay, Pharaoh. He is like ultimately in Egypt he was being known as a god. Now he need to talk the person, the big person like Pharaoh. Of course, that's terrifying. But of course, God assured him with performing some miracles with the related with the sticks and also with the kind of like hands, okay, and everything. And also like Moses were being kind of like God convinced Moses that he will be accompanied by his brother Aaron. So there you go. Fast forward the story a little bit. So Moses talked to Pharaoh, asking nicely to the Pharaoh to let my people go. Let the Hebrew leave Egypt. Okay, leave Egypt and to be free. And Pharaoh was laughing. Pharaoh thought it was ridiculous, and Pharaoh refused. Pharaoh said no to letting this Hebrew leave. In fact, the Pharaoh become more cruel to the Hebrew. Before they were asked to kind of like made a mud brick. Now this time, not just like made a mud brick, but they have to collect also the straw. What does it mean? Basically, extra job, extra work. Okay. So, and then of course it's more kind of like, it's very horrible. Well, you know what? That means kind of like, that means go to the next kind of like phase of the story. Now, God sent 10 plagues to Egypt. God sent 10 plagues to Egypt. Now, wait. Now, the 10 plagues here is to demonstrate God's divine justice against the wickedness of Pharaoh. As Pharaoh is being wicked, as the Pharaoh killed the male babies, as the Pharaoh being cruel to the Hebrew, as Pharaoh being like injustice, God demonstrate His justice upon Egypt, upon Pharaoh. Okay, the ultimate goal of this kind of like of this 10 plague is to rescue His people, to rescue the Israelites away from Egypt, the powerful nation at the time. Now, this kind of like this kind of like plagues also some kind of is some kind of like demonstration for the Egyptian that this Egyptian gods is nothing. This Egyptian gods is just a deaf and blind and mute gods, a false god, and God is the real God, is the ultimate God. It's that kind of like demonstrations. So the 10 plagues are water turns into blood first. The second, frogs, lots of frogs. The third, lices infestation. Oh, itchy hair, lices. I have so many lices on my hair. Lices. And then fourth, flies. Okay, the flies all over the places. Flies on your face, flies on your cupcakes, flies on your, I don't know, on your ears. Like that. And next, the fifth one is the dead cattle. Every cows, every sheep, every goat died mysteriously. Okay, on the fifth plague. The sixth plague, boils. Okay, boils on skins. Okay, boils. If you have a boils, just kind of like lump like that, and then if we break, it will produce some kind of like a white sticky substance, like we call it pus, and then blood comes out from it. Oh, there's a lot of boils, and then in their bodies, in the Egyptian bodies. But the Hebrew, they were spared though. They live in Goshen. They were spared from all of this plague. And then the thunder, hail, and fire. What I'm trying to say is like chunk of an ice fall from the sky. Now the eighth is the swarm of locusts. Okay, now this locust is just kind of like a tiny kind of like insects, and then they're about this big. They fly. They travel in swarm, and they eat every crops, every plants, every kind of every kind of food that herbivore will eat. Okay, grass, plants, and everything. And the ninth one is the darkness. Okay, the darkness throughout the land is just like completely dark, even though it's at noon, but then again it's dark, completely dark. And last but not least, the ultimate one is the death of the firstborn of everyone in Egypt, including animals, including of course humans. So here's the thing though, yeah, the first nine plague, the first nine plague was kind of like it was being described in the Bible, that in the book of Exodus, that Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Now, what does that mean, like harden his heart? In my previous lectures, I mentioned about what the ancient people thought about the heart. Okay, when we talk about the heart, they thought that they, whenever they feel, they thought that they think with their heart. Okay, yeah, of course, now we know that, of course, we don't think with heart, we think our brain, right? But in the past, they thought that they think with the heart. Because don't be harsh on them. Think about it. If they're happy, well, if you're happy, how will you feel? Your heart feels kind of like here, right? When you were sad, it feels kind of like what? Your heart crushed. When you were scared, your heart feels kind of like, it's just kind of like, oh no. Like, if they thought that they think with the heart. So what does it mean by hardening the heart? That means Pharaoh is being stubborn. He is being kind of like, what? He refused to admit, he refused to humble himself before God. If you think about it, somehow, the first nine plague that Pharaoh, with all of his kind of advisor, with all of his priests and the pharaoh, thought that those nine plagues can be explained natural phenomenon, as a natural phenomenon. The water turns into blood. Well, sometimes in the Nile River, like the water turns red, not as red as the blood, but turns red because of the numbers of the red sand, red soil, the topsoil of somewhere in the upstreams of the river. I mean, upstream of the Nile River, that it looks kind of red. Yeah, even like the what, the darkness during the daylight, it can be also explained naturally phenomenon by the pharaoh. At least that's what they believe, that as a sandstorm. If you ever seen a sandstorm before, maybe in a movie, not in real life, I'm pretty sure it must be very scary. It's just as dark as night, right, during the sandstorm. Now, except for the 10th one, okay, on the 10th plague, which is the death of the firstborn, that's it. Pharaoh give up. Pharaoh somehow he surrender. That's it. Okay, you know what? The God of Moses, he won. Okay, the Hebrew, they may leave. They may leave Egypt once and for all. Now, there is this kind of interesting rituals that happen on the 10th plague. As the death itself, as God, took the life of every firstborn in Egypt on the 10th plague, the Hebrew, they were spared. The Hebrew, they were spared because God gave an instruction to Moses that the Israelites, they have to celebrate a Passover. They have to celebrate a Passover, which is this is like what they have to celebrate on the Passover. Now, first they have to they have to gather as a family, and they need to sacrifice a lamb. After they sacrifice a lamb, they will use the blood to they put the blood, they kind of smear the blood on the doorpost of their house, of their entrance of their house. And third, they have to dress up. They have to wear a jacket, put on their shoes, put on their hat. They have to dress up as if they are ready to leave. They have to travel far away. They have to dress up ready for leaving. And they will have to eat in hurry. They will have to roast the lamb, the lamb meat. They have to roast it, and they eat it like what? They will eat it with the bitter herbs, at the same time with the unleavened bread that has no yeast in it. It's a kind of looks like a flat bread. Okay, so they have to eat it all in hurry. Because here's the thing. The point of this Passover is they have to remember that at that moment when they have a Passover, they were being spared by God, that as God take every life of every firstborn, the Israelites, they were being spared. Yeah? So they were spared by doing that kind of thing. Now, up to this day, the Israelites, they still celebrate the Passover. Okay, they still celebrate Passover, like somehow remembering the day that God saved them, rescued them from Egypt. Now, As they left, of course, Pharaoh let them go. In fact, many Egyptians give them gold and silver. Not sure, maybe because of they were empathized with the Israelites as a kind of like, as a goodbye, farewell. They give them gold and silver. They leave. Now, I'm going to fast forward the story a little bit. Fast forward far away. Okay, 2,000 years later. 2,000 years later. As I said earlier, the Hebrew, every year they celebrate Passover as a day that they remember that they were being rescued by God from Egypt. 2,000 years later, somewhere in Jerusalem, in the upper room, okay, a man by the name of Jesus Christ. A man by the name of Jesus, not yet Christ at the time. A teacher by the name of Jesus, had a Passover meal with his disciples. Yeah, they break the bread, they pass on the communion, they pass on the cup, and then they drink all together. But they doing it to celebrate how God rescued them from Israel, how God spared them from death. But there's something odd in that supper. There's something odd in that kind of Passover meal, as Jesus eating with the disciples, with the 12 disciples. What is that? Where's the lamb? Yeah, where's the lamb? Where's the lamb that to signify, to give them sign that somehow to protect them from the death, okay, from God's wrath, which is upon them. Where's the lamb? Okay, all right. What do you guys think? Who do you think is the lamb? Where is the lamb? Okay, all right. There you go. That is my lessons about birth of Moses and the 10th plague. So there you go. Please don't forget to read your study outline, the lecture outline. Okay, there's a lot of more information on there. So that's it. I see you guys next time. God bless you guys. Bye bye.